Hello everyone and welcome to chapter 9 lesson 3 multi-row subquery. In the previous lesson we learned about single row subquery where the subquery return only one row to the main query. Multi-row subquery is a subquery that returns multiple rows to the outer or to the main query. In single row subquery we use single row comparison operators. With multi-row subquery we can use one of the following multi-row comparison operators. We can use n, which is equal to any member in the list. We can use any. We can use also all. With any and all, you must proceed any and all with equal, not equal, greater than, smaller than or equal, or greater than and equal. Any, it returns true if at least one element exists in the result set of the subquery for which the relation is true. With all, it returns true if the relation is true for all elements in the result set of the subquery. Let's have a look at this example. Here we are using n multi-row comparison operator because our subquery returns multiple rows. The subquery select minimum salary from employees group by department ID. It returns the minimum salary per each department because we are using here group by department ID. Let's assume that the subquery returns this list to the outer query. So here in the outer query, select employee ID, last name, salary, department ID from employees, where salary in one of the values returned by the subquery. So as long as the salary of the employee in one of the values returned by the subquery here, the record will be returned as a final result for the select statement. So here for this employee, the salary of this employee is 4,400. 4,400 in the list returned by the subquery. Here is 4,400. 6,000 here for this employee. It returns because 6,000 in the list of the values returned by the subquery. This is 6,000 and so on. So n means as long as the salary of the employee in one of the values returned by the subquery, the record will be returned as a final output of the select statement. Here in this example we are using any multi-row comparison operator. As we discussed before, with any and all you must proceed it with equal, not equal, smaller than or equal, greater than or equal, and so on. Here we are using smaller than or equal any. Select employee ID, last name, salary, department ID from employees where salary is smaller than or equal any value returned by the subquery. Select minimum salary from employees group by department ID. This subquery returns the minimum salary per each department. Let us assume this is the output of the subquery. So if the employee's salary is smaller than or equal any value returned by the subquery, the record will be returned as a final output of the select state. For this record, for example, this record is returned as a final output by the select statement because the salary here of the employee is smaller than or equal any value returned by the subquery. First thing he will check if 1,000 is smaller than or equal the first value of the result of the subquery. Is 1,000 smaller than or equal 2,100? Yes, so the record will be returned. So here, for example, 2,200. Is 2,200 smaller than or equal 2,100, the first value? No. He will check with the second value. Is it smaller than or equal this value? 6,500? Yes. So the record will be returned as a final result, and so on. For this example, here we are using all multi-row comparison operator. As we said before, we have to proceed it with equal, not equal, smaller than, greater than. Here we are using greater than all. Select employee ID, last name, salary, department ID from employees where salary greater than all and the subquery here. The subquery here returns the minimum salary from employees group by department ID. It returns the minimum salary per each department. Let's assume that this is the output of the subquery returned to the outer query. If the employee's salary greater than all values returned by the subquery, the record will be returned. The salary of the employee must be greater than this value, and greater than this value, and greater than this value, means greater than all values. So if the employee earns 5,000, it will not be returned as a final output, because 5,000 is not greater than this value, and it's not greater than this value. The employee salary must be greater than all values returned by the subquery to be returned as a final output. So this employee returns because the salary of this employee is greater than this value, and 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 so on. So in this lesson, we learned about multi-row subquery and how to use in, all, and any multi-row comparison operators to solve multi-row subquery. I hope this video was informative for you, and thank you for watching.